Welcome to BoxingScene Today. I'm Ricardo Celis here in the studio with the Magic Man, Paulie Malignaggi, and we got via Zoom the champ, Chris Algieri. Gentlemen, three legendary fighters have been named for the 2026 ballot for the International Boxing Hall of Fame. They're Gennadiy Golovkin, Triple G, a great force in middleweight division, Vernon Forrest, ex-champ in the welterweight division, and also from Ireland, Stephen Collins. Paulie, I'll start with you, man. Gennadiy Golovkin, definitely a Hall of Famer. Eh?
Yeah, I think Gennadiy Golovkin, first ballot, easy. It's a no-brainer, you know. Vernon Forrest, I think also, you know, it's been a while, but I think, you know, it's a solid one. I think Vernon would have had an even better career had he not been avoided for a bit of time. If you remember, Vernon was a 1992 U.S. Olympian, but really didn't get his big shot until he got to face Shane Mosley in 2001, 2002. You know, it took him almost a decade. And he was around in the welterweight era where there was a lot of great welterweights, and they kind of he never really got his shot in that era. So when he did, he showed, you know, the level he was on. Yes, he did get beat by Ricardo Mayorga, but had to, you know, beat the Shane Mosley, who at the time when he beat him was the number one pound-for-pound guy in the world, you know? So that's a solid one. And then Steve Collins. Steve Collins, you know, sometimes it's forgotten about. He was a terrific super middleweight in the era of really tough British super middleweight rivalries where you have Nigel Benn, you have Chris Eubank, you have Michael Watson, and Collins is among those as well. You know, I think Collins actually beat both of those guys, beat Eubank and Benn, as a matter of fact. So
beat them twice.
Yeah, he beat them twice. Yeah, so you know, those are guys that you know, that was a fun time in boxing as well. So certainly a nostalgic ballot this year. We'll say that.
Chris, what do you think about the nominees for the Hall of Fame for this year?
And Champ, I think I'm going to agree with you, or you're going to agree with my sentiment that a lot of times Hall of Fame announcements in terms of introductions are a bit underwhelming, and you have a lot of questions. Not with these three. Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Champ. I think all three of these are first ballot Hall of Famers that absolutely deserve to be there. This is an excellent induction class. Let me start with the oldest, Collins. Man, I'm surprised it took this long. Mm-hmm. He was so good in an era where there was really good super middleweight, like you said, beating Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr. twice each. Pretty phenomenal. Ended his career with a bunch of wins. It was one of those guys who really fell off, and is a guy that has a tremendous amount of respect over in the UK and in Ireland, obviously. So I'm kind of surprised it took this long for him to be there, but absolutely deserves to be there. Next, Vernon Forrest. I was at that first Shane Mosley fight with Vernon Forrest, and he was phenomenal, man. He hurt Shane. Shane was unbeatable at that point. That was like prime Shane, where, I mean, I remember he fought Adrian Stone, put the guy face down. Like, he was just so good, so tough, and just explosive and never got tired. So for Vernon to go out there and do what he did to Shane that night, blast him in a body shot, you could literally hear Shane scream, and grabs on. Then, Nick, you said he had those two losses to Ricardo Mayorga. But listen, Ricardo Mayorga turned out to be a bit of a special case in the sport of boxing. That was his showcase fight, and really put him on where he was. But even after that, Vernon at 154 was a dangerous champion. And to your point, who knows what heights he could have reached if those guys had given him a shot earlier. To be undefeated and everyone talking about you, but not getting the marketability, not getting the chance to fight on those networks so people could see you, really unfortunate for him. And then obviously him losing his life so early is super, super unfortunate. And then lastly, Gennadiy Golovkin. You know, I came up in this Gennadiy Golovkin era. I watched it full time, you know, firsthand. I was a world champion, going front row seats for HBO and talking about Triple G and watching him be as dominant as he was. Amazing amateur background as well. A couple hundred amateur fights. Was a real force, man. He was a marketable guy. He fought the way you wanted to fight. You know, he had the Mexican style. He had his little quips and quotes that he would say that got people revved up. And he went out there and he fought, and he was trying to knock you out each and every time. 2 epic fights with Canelo Alvarez. The third one was not much to be remembered, but still a trilogy nonetheless with another great fighter. Triple G, another guy that deserves to be there. And he's one that I wish we could have seen him in with some of those other big names as well. But all in all, I think this is a really good induction class, and looking forward to discussing these guys.
Especially Gennadiy Golovkin, when he fought Canelo Alvarez for the first time, he got at the draw because of the Adelaide Bird. Adelaide Bird gave almost all the rounds for Canelo Alvarez, and then she got suspended for that.
Yeah, Adelaide Bird. As a matter of fact, it's funny because now that you're mentioning it, it's making me think with the champ talking as well. Two of these guys made their career, but also could have had better careers had they not been so avoided. I feel like Golovkin was very much avoided even when he was on that monumental run where he was knocking guys off, And Vernon sort of had the same issue as well. Vernon was, like I said, a 1992 Olympian, same Olympic class as Oscar De La Hoya, So it's, during that same run of time, they had a good run of form, but Oscar was getting all the fame and Vernon was, sort of staying below the limelight despite looking impressive, remaining undefeated and moving his way into position and contention and not getting big shots. So it's funny because sometimes you're so good that it's hard. It's the layman may not be able to appreciate it because you're not getting the shot, the opportunity at the best fighters all the time, And sometimes they sort of let your prime pass, and you never really get your big opportunity. I think of guys like Demetrius Andrade, for example. He was so avoided that I think people never really got to see his best. But when it comes to Golovkin and Vernon Forrest, their time did eventually come to where people started to see how good and how dangerous they were, and I think that it sort of makes it more of a conversation point to say, okay, that's why they were having a tough time getting big shots, big opponents to get in the ring with them, because you see what happens. They are so good. With Vernon, there's a story because I remember, I'm a little older than you, champ. That Vernon had knocked off Shane in the Olympic trials. In 1992. Yeah. That's why Shane wasn't in the Olympics in '92. He was in that generation as well, and Vernon had knocked him off. I think twice in the trials, from what I had heard. So the Shane didn't want to see Vernon either, none of those guys really had wanted to get in the ring with Vernon, but Vernon linked up with Al Heyman, and it was the beginning of Al Heyman's sort of tenure into boxing, and basically Al made it happen. He forced HBO to basically put the number one pound for pound guy in the world against this little known dangerous contender in Vernon Forrest, and when they made that fight happen, Shane had to kind of do it. I mean, I'm not saying Shane was trying to avoid it, but it was among that time where Vernon just wasn't getting a shot, and unfortunately for Shane, it was Shane that had to give him the shot. And you saw why Vernon had been so dangerous and why people had been so apprehensive about it. Because when you saw him with Shane, champ, you were at that fight, so I'll let you explain it even more.
That was a big talking point leading up to that. They're like, oh, Shane Mosley, he got beat in the amateurs by this guy. I think it was twice, like you said. Is it repeat or revenge? And Vernon was like, I got this guy's number. Mm-hmm. Like, he was so confident. He knew it. And in hindsight, Shane probably knew it too. Yeah. Certain guys just don't match up. That old cliche, styles make fights. Mm-hmm. Styles do make fights, and also styles make guys who are going to always beat you. And I just think Vernon just had Shane's number. His ability to, his nickname was a Viper. His ability to fight at a distance and pull that trigger and fire with those right hands, his counters. He was a good puncher as well, which I think a very underrated puncher was Vernon Forrest. He hurt Shane several times when they fought in both fights. I don't think Shane really wanted to see Vernon either, especially at that time. And again, that was at the height of Shane's powers. Yeah. He just had his number, and Vernon knew it. Yeah,
and Vernon, I had one of my experiences in my life was that I was in couple of different camps of Vernon as well, down in Vero Beach, and I saw, the temperament that he had, and he was sort of the older brigade by the time I got there, sort of one of the elder statesmen in the camp. At that time, Vero Beach had a pretty solid training camp with a lot of good contenders, and I saw Vernon's temperament, man. One of the calmest guys outside the ring, just you would never be able to tell he's a fighter because he had this calm demeanor, but there's a switch in him, and then sometimes that switch could happen outside the ring too. He was very, very calm, but he was a grown man in that there was a very distinct line drawn that you didn't cross with him. And that line was also in the ring. I mean, it was always crossed in the ring because he became a different person in the ring. One of the meanest guys I ever saw in a boxing ring, but yet...
Mean like a viper.
Yeah, but yet one of the coolest, calm, collected guys outside the ring. Never really had highs emotionally or lows emotionally outside the ring, was kind of cool and collected. But like I said, you could cross that line outside the ring too, and it would be quick, and unfortunately, I think that's what led to his demise too. When he was murdered that night, I think it was something where he couldn't let it go that they had just robbed him at gunpoint, and he went to chase the gunman with his own pistol. It's kind of kind of, a sad end to what was a good guy and a really good fighter, unappreciated fighter. So I'm happy that he's on the ballot this year.
That's something that happened over there in Atlanta. When Triple G was fighting, I went a couple of times to the summit on his training camp with the Abel Sanchez. The way he trained Chris, it was amazing, and he had a special exercise for his forearm with a kettlebell. With a kettlebell, that is very hard, man. I tried a couple of times; it's very hard, but that's gave him the punch that he had on the ring.
I was in training camp with Daniel Jacobs when he was preparing for Triple G and helping Danny get ready for the fight. Helping his nutrition, his fitness, getting ready for the fight. And we had a quick interaction with Triple G. We were doing a media hit. It was like a live radio show, and we were in this very narrow corridor. Our two teams passing, and Triple G was an extremely respectful guy, as was Danny. So the teams were fine. They just had to go down the whatever. And it was the first time I had ever been face to face with Triple G. And just calmly and coolly, just like you said how Vernon was, super calm, Triple G, Gennadiy goes, "Hey, Chris," and just like shakes my hand. And I'm shaking his hand, and I'm talking about his hand. I'm talking this hand and his forearm. And he just had such a unique build for a fighter. And we were eye to eye. Again, he's a middleweight. I was a junior welterweight at the time, so he's not like a super tall or imposing guy. He's not very wide-shouldered at all, probably actually a little more narrow than me. But his forearms, his hands, his hips, different parts of his body, which are specific boxing muscles, were very, very overdeveloped. And you could tell, and that's where he generated a lot of his power from. He was one of those guys who had a jab that was like a right hand. It was a power punch. His jab was one of the most effective jabs that we've seen in recent years in our generation, in terms of precision, in terms of being able to bust you up, and in terms of setting up the rest of his power shots, whether it was his beautiful right hand, the overhand shot, or that left hook that he loved, or even that overhand left to the top of the head that he threw really well. And you mentioned that exercise that he does with the kettlebell to increase the strength and endurance of that forearm. To land the punches the way that he did, where he was knuckle punching the top of guys' heads and knocking them out, your forearm's got to be made out of steel, and your bones got to be hard.
And you got to be tightening that fist too.
Yeah.
Yes. So all the preparation that he did leading up to to fight night paid off, because he was able to do things that other fighters just couldn't do. And we talked about his accomplishments and what he is and what he could have been even more. He's still a legendary guy, and that's why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, hands down, no question. Because everyone has stories like I just had, that whether they met him, they've seen him do things that other people can't do, and that's what modern legends are all about. And Triple G certainly is.
Definitely. In the women's category, there's also a couple of women. There's 3 women. From Japan, 5-division champion Naoka Fujioka. From Germany, 2-division champion Christina Hammer. And from Mexico, Jackie Nava. In the name of Poli Malignaggi, Chris Algieri, I'm Ricardo Celis. Thank you for watching Boxing Scene Today.